Welcome everybody to Esoteric Cosmos Live. It's Justin Varengia.
And Rosebud Kincaid.
And we're going to be talking about UFO wars in the sky. What I want to get into first is share with them about 5 clips. This is a 60-minute show. Keep that in mind. So we're going to show about 30 minutes of different news clips and resources, just so you can understand from credible resources that there can possibly be a war going on in the skies. And then we're actually going to show some proof. We're going to talk about all that in a little bit. We have a lot to cover.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover.
So, do you want to cut right into the...
Cut right into the video.
Okay.
All right. In the meantime, from overseas today, Britain's Ministry of Defense is today refusing to comment on a report that their pilots spent years trying to shoot down UFOs. It allegedly happened a number of times dating back to the 1980s. Well, Nick Pope is our guest. He made this information public. He's also the former head of the Ministry of Defense's UFO project. So if anybody knows, we think it's you, Nick. Now, you say that they've been trying to do this for about 30 years. How do we know that?
The Ministry of Defence here in Britain has been investigating UFOs since the 1950s, but other countries as well have had these sorts of incidents, and I think it's a question of trying to put them together and see what pattern emerges.
Now, you said in your quote is saying that we want to shoot down a UFO that will resolve the issue once and for all. To your knowledge, have they ever been successful?
No, they haven't, and I mean, I'm personally, of course, not advocating that sort of strategy. But what I was saying is that every country, whether it's America, Britain, whatever, takes the territorial integrity of its airspace very, very seriously. Whatever you think about UFOs, whatever you think they are, whether you're a skeptic, you're a believer or whatever, this is a defense issue, it's a national security issue, it's an air safety issue, and while rules of engagement are of course highly classified, the last option is of course always a shoot down.
All right, now you have said that the Royal Air Force would only engage when they perceived a threat. Well, how do you define what is a perceived threat? Is that the pilot's call?
No, yes, under some circumstances it has to be. If a pilot believes that they're being fired on, but we've had some cases in England where there have been virtual dogfights between UFOs and military jets.
Dogfights?
Yeah, the dogfights, yeah, absolutely. These things, the UFO issue suffers, I think, from an image problem. But actually, if you look behind the silly season stories about this, these things are seen by pilots, they are tracked on radar, and there have been many, many incidents on the record over the years
Nick,
of these sorts of things.
If there was a dogfight, pardon the interruption here, over the hills of England or the countryside of England, we'd know about that by now, would we not?
Well, yes, and indeed that's the exciting news. The Ministry of Defence is in the process of declassifying and releasing its entire archive of UFO files going back decades.
Now, we've had a little bit of that back here in our own country, okay? Different parts of the country, New Jersey and Arizona, and what they've concluded in some of these cases is that neighbors are filling up helium balloons, putting a flare on the bottom of it, lighting it, letting it go up in the air. So it looks like it's drifting in a certain pattern or a certain area, but it's not a UFO, Nick.
Yes, of course. 95% of UFO sightings do turn out to be things like these helium balloons and aircraft lights. But that's not what's of interest to the government and the military, of course. They're interested in these UFOs when they're tracked on military radar systems and when they're seen by pilots. Commercial airline pilots have seen them, military pilots have
Nick,
seen
are
them.
you a believer?
On the balance of probability, I think it's more likely than not that we're not alone in the universe. Whether these things are extraterrestrial or not, I don't know. But we need to be treating this as a serious issue, I think. When we have these sorts of incidents in our airspace, it makes it a national security issue.
And liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
Space. Where better to look for alien craft visiting our planet? In September of 1991, Space Shuttle Discovery captured an unidentified object on film. What you're seeing now is actual footage shot by NASA cameras from that shuttle mission. Watch the top of your screen. Note the object that moves from right to left. Two mysterious flashes, and it makes an immediate 135-degree turn and accelerates. This is followed by a strange streak of light, which seems to narrowly miss the unknown object. This dramatic footage has been in dispute since it was shot.
I studied it extensively over maybe a 2-year period at least.
University of Nebraska physicist Jack Kasher worked for nearly 10 years in the research and development of a Star Wars defense system for the upper atmosphere. His quantitative analysis of the NASA footage concludes that the UFO cannot be explained as a natural phenomenon.
It's clearly above the atmosphere and air glow of the Earth. It maneuvers, it changes direction, it accelerates, and so the only thing really left is spacecraft.
Others think this object is simply a small ice particle floating a few feet from the shuttle. Ice particles are a common waste product of the numerous shuttles that have orbited Earth. But Kasher is convinced NASA has recorded strong evidence of a large, intelligently controlled alien space vehicle.
One of the very strange things that happens is that the main object actually stops and sits there for half a second before it accelerates back up to the right. An ice particle could not do that. If they're not ice particles, you don't have too many other options. They're not space junk, they're not satellites, they're not meteors, because those objects don't change direction.
There's never been anything that I've experienced that gave me any cause to consider that there might be other life forms.
Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, has a different opinion.
I mean, the sky is filled with moving objects here. Do I think that they are, that is credible evidence? No way. You got to have much more confirming it. That doesn't impress me very much.
Not every former astronaut is a skeptical.
Well, it is true that there's all sorts of things floating in space, but I don't think it should be dismissed out of hand. We need to take a more careful look at this type of evidence than we might otherwise.
Dr. Edgar Mitchell also walked on the moon during the Apollo 14 mission.
I'm quite open to looking at evidence and looking at data that purports to speak of an extraterrestrial presence or some sort of space activity we're not familiar with, and analyze it critically. Perhaps we have been visited.
To me, I don't see anything in the video that reflects anything about UFO.
Research scientist Skeet Vaughn studies the upper atmosphere for NASA. He believes the unknown objects are common space debris or waste products, most likely from the shuttle itself. And he has a theory to explain their movement.
If you look at the video very carefully, you'll notice there's a flash of light. And that flash of light is probably the thruster engine on one of the shuttles. When you have a thrust effect, the thrusting of the gases move out, and that hits the object and makes the object move also.
If you're a skeptic, it's easy to brush off. But if you're open-minded and you see this, there's something weird about it.
Dr. Mark Carlotto has 20 years of experience conducting digital image processing for scientific research.
These were not videos taken by someone in their backyard. These are taken aboard a U.S. spacecraft, so the integrity of the data cannot be questioned. NASA's explanation is that what we're looking at here are ice particles floating around the shuttle, but when you look at it more carefully, it doesn't make sense. If it was a thruster firing, when the thruster firing occurs, the orientation of the spacecraft should change very slightly. But we don't see any change in the apparent motion of the stars, so that indicates the attitude of the shuttle has not changed from the thruster firing.
Dr. Kasher believes the UFO was miles from the shuttle, well out of range from a thruster firing, and that it was moving